Today is Tuesday, November 1st,
Right.
2016, and Joe Turner and myself, Judy Meyer, are talking to Phyllis Ferris. Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
And Phyllis, I have talked to you off and on for several years now.
Yes.
Because I see you at the Bridgeton Recreation Center, the new one as it's called now. But I really haven't had a chance to talk to you a lot about your past life, should we say. So if you wouldn't mind, will you tell us where you were born?
Seattle, Washington.
Wow. Well, you really came far.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling us when?
December 27th, 1928.
Okay, thank you. So when did you come to St. Louis?
Back, I came to Missouri when I think I was about 17 or 18 years
Okay.
old. I got married very young, and I think I mentioned to you, I ended up getting GEDs later, but I got married on February 11th in 1946. It was during wartime.
Oh,
And I had fallen in love with a beautiful young man who was from St. Louis area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Missouri. Actually, his mother lived out in Cuba, Missouri, down near Sullivan.
Right.
And we met when we were 14 years old.
Oh, so he was from Washington also?
No, he was.
Oh, that's right. You said
He's
that.
From here. Yeah, he was.
Oh,
he was from
sorry.
here. And he was in the service.
Oh, okay.
Out there, and we were on a ferry. I was on a ferry boat going from Bremerton, Washington to Seattle with my little sister, and this young man in uniform bumped me, and it was like he wanted to talk to me, and I had very strict instructions from my parents that wasn't what we did, and I went back to the ladies' lounge. But my little sister stayed and talked to him and gave him our telephone number. And then later on, he called me. He called our house, and I talked to him. And I was very attracted. He was a darling looking boy. I always think of myself as kind of a plain little girl. And he was a beautiful boy. He was just a beautiful child. We were both. He had lied his age. He was only 14.
Oh,
And
my
he and his
gosh.
brother, one was 14 and one was 16. And they left home, and they went and signed up for the service. They were going to save the world, you know.
Oh, my
The
goodness.
young, idealistic boys. And yeah, we met when we were 14 years old.
Wow.
And then he wrote me. He was shipped to somewhere in California, and he wrote me beautiful letters. My mother read them, and she was confused and concerned, because it was talking about how much he loved me and we were going to run away and get noticed. I don't know, we read what it was about, but she had my mail stopped.
Oh.
And he had left the area, and it was now in California, and he was shipped out. And he was on a ship called the Liscum Bay, and I heard when it was torpedoed.
Oh, my goodness.
And then I never heard from him, so I made the, I guess, logical thought that he was killed on that boat, and I never heard from him because my mother had my mail stopped. And then about 3 years later, one day I got a phone call, and it was him. And he was one of the most amazing days of my life. This was like come back from the dead. And he came back, and we got to, and now he was the sweetest boy I ever knew. When he was this young boy, when he was 14 and 15, we were together. It was my first boyfriend, it was my first kiss, this boy was such a big part of my life. And one day I was waiting for the school bus, and he came by, and he said, "Why don't we go over to Seattle and get married today?" And I said,
Okay.
No more than we were going to go to the show.
Yeah.
And we went over and got married. We went
Oh,
on the ferry
without
boat.
parents' permission?
Nothing. No.
Wow.
And I was 17.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was supposed to be going to school, and then we got married, and I came home just as though nothing had happened. I never told them for a couple of weeks, never said anything at all. And then he was being shipped out. And I amazed myself how I handled this with my parents. I didn't handle it well at all, really, when I think about it, because I just said, I've heard from Chuck, and I'm going to California to meet him because he's stationed there now, and I'm married to him.
Oh my, that's quite a shocker.
I'm married to him, and I've been married 2 or 3 months, whatever it was. And I said, and I'm leaving. And I did.
Wow.
He'd already sent me transportation things, and for me to fly there, and just different things. But I was a kind of a girl. This was so atypical for me to have done this. And I've oftentimes thought of it when I said to myself that I gave it no more thought than if he was asking me to go to the show that night, and but when I really realized my intuitive side, it felt right. It felt right. And I struggled with a lot of things in my life, but I don't regret at all. And what I understood of love when I was with him, was. But what I didn't understand, the 14-year-old boy was one thing. He was the sweetest, but 3 years had happened of wartime with him. He had seen some terrible things, and it wasn't only what the enemy did, it's some of the things we did.
Right.
That were to this idealistic young little boy at 14 years old, and we understand now about PTSD.
Right.
We didn't understand any of that back in the 40s. We didn't understand any of that. All I knew was he could be so moody.
Oh.
He could be, and he began self-medicating, taking drugs and drinking, because he'd have these terrible, terrible times. And we had 3 children. And like I told you, there's parts of this that I can't.
That's okay. That's good. Were you in California then when the children were born?
No, I wasn't. Remember, I had come back here, and then when I was going to have my first child, I went back home.
Okay.
I went home to Washington. And Charlene was born in Bremerton, Washington. Yeah.
How old is she now?
She's on the 7th of this month. She will be 70 years old. So you can tell it's been a long time.
Yeah.
1946,
Yes.
Yeah. And the times with him were rather difficult a lot of times. And he died when we were both 24.
Oh my.
And remember I never finished high school. I was a high school dropout. Now I'm a widow with 3 little kids. And
Here in St. Louis? Okay.
And my goal then was to just take care of my children.
Okay.
And I had this belief, very deeply spiritual kind of idea that as a little kid, and I believed that God was totally in charge, that I would only have the children God intended me to have, and that now I was a widow, and that was part of God's plan somehow, and that was just my life. I never dreamed I'd ever marry again. I just thought that was my life. That was it. And my goal was to take a big part of my life. I was raised in institutions and foster homes.
You were?
Yeah, a great part of it. Because my mother and father were both alive. But they disliked one another enormously. And it became a ward of the state.
Oh.
My mother had remarried, and she had a lot of other children. I was the oldest, but she became ill and had to be hospitalized. And one of my main memories, one of the people, if I am very dependable, and I think I am, and everything's, it's because of the role model of my stepdad.
Oh.
I got a stepdad, but my mother and father were separated before I was born.
Oh, okay.
And I had a stepdad when I was 18 months old. And he was one of the best people I've ever known in my life. The best thing I think my mother ever did for me, other than giving birth, was getting me my daddy.
Mm-hmm.
He was a man who went to the 4th grade in school. He was a hard-working person, worked in a foundry in different jobs, you know, whatever it took. He was a man of utter integrity. And anybody, like in our town, Bremerton, Daddy was, they'd say, well, his name was Oliver, if Ollie tells you something, just take it to the bank. My dad taught me always to keep your word, how important it was always to be truthful, you know, except I lied about meeting that boy, but, and running off, you know.
Infatuation just kind of got in the way.
It was, no, you know, when we think about it, people talk about puppy love. No, I dearly loved him. As much as a 17-year-old loves another 17-year-old, I loved him. Absolutely loved him. I did plan on leaving him at one time because it became so difficult. Mm-hmm. It was so hard with his mood swings and things that were not good for the children.
So you had a girl named Charlene, and who else?
Charlene is my first child, who was born in 46. I had Kathleen Ann in 48, and my son Chuck Jr. was born in 50.
And you were living here in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Where did they go to school? The children.
You know, I hardly remember. I remember where we lived when they were real little. We lived down at in a housing project kind of place in the city.
In the city?
At 1201 South 14th Street was the address. Yeah. And I know they were very little. Shar had started to school there, and he died when we were in that house. Then I'm trying to remember. I lived. It's a lot of years ago. It's kind of hard to keep some of that. I don't remember schools they went to until I bought a home, and they went to schools. I lived right at River de Pere in Morganford.
Okay,
right
south.
in there. There was a complex. He had died, and there was an insurance policy of $7,000, which at that time was a good amount of money. And it was a strange little thing because I never spent a dime on myself. Every bit of money that I had, and I was 24 or 25 at the time, went to buying a home, and I bought it at 7852 Leona, a very nice neighborhood. The Windsor School was the school that they went to. It's a great school. Yeah, and
were you working then?
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What kind of work did you do?
Well, what I did, I went to the employment office as soon as I could, and in the meantime, when I was in high school, I had taken typing and shorthand. I never wanted to do that. I wanted art courses, but my mother insisted that I take typing and shorthand. So when I was a young widow, I had those skills, and so I got office jobs.
Okay.
And I always was able to work myself up into do things because it was always so important, because I was all they had. These 3 children were the most important thing in the world to me. That was, remember I told you I'd been in institutions and foster homes, and I never wanted that for them. And I was the only thing keeping them from that. And so I didn't date people. I just lived my life as this mama, you know, and I ended up getting a good job. Different things with jobs, because I can remember one time I was working at a real estate company, and I was now this, I was a real estate manager at a real estate company. A loan manager, I'm sorry, a loan manager at a real estate company. And things were going quite well, and one of the owners asked me about this one friend of his. Her name was Mabel Pettis, and she wanted to come in and learn some of the things, and what he had me train her for the loan things, and I did. never knowing that right near Thanksgiving time that year, she bought out that part of the company
Wow.
and took it over herself, and then I had no job.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Right, you know, it got the worst time. You know, here I was, 3 little kids, no money extra. I always managed very carefully,
Uh-huh.
you know, and I had the home and I had everything.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to keep it all balanced and then not to have a job.
Yeah.
That was one of the times that was really frightening to me. But what had happened, that I went back to the employment office right away, and I got a job that changed my life forever.
What was it?
Yeah, what this job was when I went to work with the Teamsters Union. And my daddy had been a trade unionist. He had worked with, you know, and was covered with union things and always went to union meetings and stuff, so I always had that background. And I went to work for something called the Missouri-Kansas Conference of Teamsters. And I worked there quite a few years. But what happened as people, and this was a union, and this is just take care of workers. Let me tell you from my experience that happened as a worker when I wasn't covered. They didn't cover me because I was, you know, staff.
Right.
And, as people would leave in this complex where we worked, this one floor, there was Joint Council 13, Missouri-Kansas Conference of Teamsters, the Development Corporation, which was the building, and the Central Conference of Teamsters that handled all the strike sanctions and things. Well, as people would leave their job, they knew, the head guy with things knew that I really needed to work, that I had 3 little kids, and my job was extremely important, and we had labor health institutes, so that my kids had care always and stuff, you know, and so it was very valuable to me. And as people would be gone, they'd give me their work. So I then took over Joint Council 13, and then I got Development Corporation and Central Conference of Teamsters, and I'm handling this. You know. Now there was one of the men that I worked with that a lot of times there was a reputation of the girls being kind of flirty in my place job and going out with people and things. That never happened. You know, I was given this administrative assistant, and again, I had all these different pieces of my job that I kept taking on more and more, and he got then elected to the national things and wasn't there as much, so he had other people handling the jobs, and that's when I started getting all these other jobs, and not a whole lot of increase in my pay. You know, I didn't, but I never, until one day, because I would have to, I had much more than I could handle, truthfully. And I was a hard worker. And I was having to bring my kids in on Saturday and let them sit in the conference room, and I'd get some more work finished done, and having to work later in the evenings and work on things because of this one office manager who was over the whole thing. His name was Charles Chepray. And that was one day, it was on a Friday night, and he brought in a whole batch of stuff and put it on my desk for me to finish. And I had something I wanted to do with the children that evening. And it just finally clicked in my mind. I walked in and I said, "We've got 2 hours. You tell me which of this you want done in those 2 hours, because I'm leaving." And he did. And you know, it was never quite the same. He never loaded things on me quite as much.
How about that?
And I never ever had done that. You know, I've always just, it was so important to keep my job, take care of those children.
Right,
But this time it was just too much.
You stood up for yourself.
One time, one of the bosses, we were having a meeting. We were meeting at Ruggieri's restaurant for a luncheon meeting. And I got all my things together, and I brought the wrong set of minutes. And there was no time to go back. And the boss who was in charge of that part was Dale Ferris. But that time he was just a co-worker, you know what I'm saying? And I talked to him and I said, I don't know how to handle this, but I brought the wrong minutes. And he was talking to the lawyer at that time. And he said, "Okay." And he just put the minutes, turned them over. And when the meeting started, he said, I'll never forget, "We got such a full agenda today. guys, let's just skip the minutes. Let's get right down to what
How
we need
about
to do.
that?
No one ever knew,
Uh-huh.
and he made a friend. I mean, you know.
Yes.
Well, in the meantime, he had found out one time, because I didn't know at the time, he was up in my office, and I had to look something up in a file cabinet, and I bent down to get. He noticed that I had holes in the bottom of my shoes.
Oh my.
But I only knew this later, years later. He said the shoes were nicely shined, but they had holes in
Oh
the
my.
bottoms. And he wondered about it. And then he found out that I was a widow with 3 little children. And he was a compassionate, nice man, you know. But he was nothing to me in any way for years. I probably worked with him 10, 11 years. And it was he was just a co-worker, and I noticed how kind he was. And he was smart. He was a very smart and funny. He had a funny sense of humor. He was just a nice man. But that's all he was for years and years. It was just nothing. I traveled with him on cars, buses, trains, planes, all kinds. Nothing. There was never one flirting thing, nothing in all our lives together. Until when Kennedy, I think, I'm not positive, but I think this is when it was because I'm a little unclear. When Kennedy died, I think that was the time. I was very upset when I got the news, and Dale was there and comforted me, and it turned into something else. It just morphed into totally out of nowhere. It was just like when he was holding me, I wanted him to hold me, yeah. And it changed the whole thing forever, yeah. But it's so funny because there was nothing. And I'm an intuitive. I picked up nothing. Nothing of it. It just wasn't there. I didn't
Did
understand.
he tell you later on that he had been interested in you?
One of my dear friends had said to me, you know, I suspect he'd been cared about you for a long time. I said, if he ever did, it never was ever discussed. He never ever told me that. You know, he may have, but I don't know. Maybe he did, you know.
I guess you weren't giving him signals for him
No, I
to
obviously didn't.
try.
No, because having my job is very, very important. Raising those children, you know, that was, you know, and I'd gotten them raised right around that time. My kids were bigger and, you know, and had gone to high school and doing their lives, yeah.
Where did your kids go to high school?
You know, isn't this Cleveland?
Okay, South St. Louis, right.
Cleveland. I think that was it.
So they're on their way to being...
And my son went off and joined the Navy.
Oh.
Because his father had done.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah. And
so you married Dale Ferris.
I married Dale Ferris.
And he was not married previously?
He had been married. Yes, he'd been married quite a few years and had 4 children.
Oh.
Before, yeah.
Oh,
But when his wife, when they were together, she never participated in any of our activities. She had a very much separate life. That she didn't mingle with his things, and I knew nothing about his life. Nothing. I didn't care to. You know what I'm saying? It just didn't. There was nothing. My life was. When I look at myself, my life was so focused on my kids.
Well, I think for a lot of women that was quite true.
I
and
think
probably
so.
still is.
But I sound like such a. But I was so focused just on. But that was my responsibility, you know. And Dad raised me. If you have responsibility, that's
right.
That's
Keep
your
it
thing.
right.
Yeah.
How long were you married to Dale
7
Ferris?
years.
7? 7.
Both guys in my life, I had 7 years with them.
7. What happened to Dale, may I ask?
Heart attack.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So when he died, well, I should say, when you married, were you still working for the Teamsters?
No. Oh no.
So then after he died, did you go back to work or try to go back to work?
Well, I think I went to work, but I don't remember much about it, except that I was reading, I'm a reader, and I was reading a book on grief, and it said if you live in a fairly large community, there'll be a college or university, and they have very good counseling services. So when I contacted the University of Missouri, I wasn't calling to go to school. All I was doing was I was hurting very much. And I'll never forget when I called the counseling office, the secretary said it was a stormy, it had been stormy and it was bad the streets were icy out there because she said, if you can slide on in, I'll slide you in.
That's
I
cute.
never forgotten, because it was such a big thing. And it turned out the weather was bad, and instead of counselors being there, it was the head of the department, the dean of the university, Margaret Fagan, happened to be there that day. And my mother's name was Margaret, and my mother, Margaret, gave birth to me. This woman gave birth to who I became.
Oh.
She opened the doors to me. I remember I was a high school dropout. She had me go take a GED, and I did well on that.
Uh-huh.
And she then had me take CLEP examinations.
What? What kind of examination?
CLEP, C-L-E-P.
I'm not familiar
I don't
with that.
even know, all I know is CLEP things, and then I'd go in and I don't remember the day of the week, but I'd go in and take for 2 or 3 hours at a time, take some tests, and then another day, because there were 2 separate days. And I ended up with over 20 hours of credits before I ever set foot in college. Never cost me a penny, other than just for the CLEP. They're more now, they were very inexpensive back then. It was a long, long time ago.
Right, uh-huh. What years was this? Was this in
Back when I was
1970s?
About 40. I was in my 40s.
But do you think it was...
And I have to sit and figure it out.
No, it was later on.
My son Dan was born in 68,
Okay.
and Dale died in 72.
Oh, okay,
So
so
those are
this
kind
is
of-
maybe late 70s
yeah.
or middle 70s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those kind of dates I remember, because they were so significant.
Mm-hmm. So did at this time when you were taking these exams, and were you thinking about maybe that you
No,
would-
I was. Dale and I had talked about. I kind of thought about going back to school. He said, "Honey, there's no way people like us could ever compete with those kids with computers.
Oh.
We couldn't do that." But what he didn't get was that when I did go, it was a privilege to get to. No one in my family had gone to college, and it was a privilege to go. And I've always wanted to know things, and all this stuff was there available to me, books and wonderful things, and I loved being a student. And I did quite well, and ended up with a double master's.
What was the master's in?
Education and counseling. I'm a counselor and a master's in both of those. Yeah.
So you went into education. What did you think you
But
might
what happened,
do?
I was going to be a social worker. And in fact, I took a course in sociology. That's how much I knew me. And, I was going to be a social worker and help. I knew I was a people helper. One of the most significant things, again, I was reading a book, and it was Beyond Ourselves by Catherine Marshall. And I stood up from reading it, and I said, I can't imagine. I knew God was calling me. And I thought, I can't imagine how I can serve you. But here I am. However I can serve you, here I am, Lord. And one of my friends said, it was the most dangerous thing you can do. Dale was still alive. Dan was a little boy. And I'm giving my life to God. And within a few months, Dale had died of a heart attack.
Mm.
And that's when I decided, I thought I was going for counseling, and I ended up with this possibility of going back to school. And it started my whole new life. I dreamed, I'm going to be a social worker. I'm a minister. Instead, there was an opportunity. There was a need. Over and over again in my life, things just happen. They're not anything I'm planning to do at all. But I was the president of the board in the church.
Now, which church?
The Oberlin Unity Church.
So when did your life kind of shift towards the church from the social work and education?
Well, it happened just by almost like osmosis, like with realizing I loved Dale. I mean, it was just, it happened. It was nothing. What had happened was I was president of the board of a church.
Okay.
And what had happened, I've been taking training on the side with classes and things for quite some time. But there were some, I want to be careful how I say some of these things, but there were some irregularities in things that were being done in our church. And it necessitated our not having those ministers any longer. Okay. And it wouldn't, we were having a board meeting, and I presented some of these things to the group. And I wasn't sure what to do. We had a young 19-year-old boy on our board. J.C. Armbruster was his name. He stood up and he said, I make a motion that they go. Because they had said we were either going to grow in a way we didn't really want to, or they were going to go. And he said, I make the motion that they go. That wasn't me. I mean, I was, oh my God, what are we going to do now, you know? So it ended up, I took over just handling things, and we had ministers come in from Unity headquarters from time to time. And this went on for some time. In the meantime, I've been tracing of that. But what happened then, a man on our board, Jimmy Jones, it's funny how people never forget them, because he said, my group was going to all go to lunch afterwards, and he called me. I will never forget, I was cooking a pot of chili on my kitchen in Bridgeton, and Jimmy Jones called me, and he said something. He said, Phil, we've been meeting, and we would like you not to run to be our president any longer. I said, Jimmy, what have I possibly done? I don't understand. What did I ever do that you could? He said, because you're our minister.
Oh, he was promoting you.
And I said, oh, Jimmy, I can't be the minister. I do not have the credentials for it. He said, Phyllis, yes, you do. And I said, I don't understand, Jim. He said, because one of the members of our board was a young one whose mother worked at Unity Village. And she said, you don't have to have actual ministerial degree. Because when the Unity movement was founded, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were the founders, they never wanted ministers. They wanted people like who I was at that time, a woman in her 40s, who wanted to live and just serve and help others and spread the word of our Lord. And so what really happened was, you don't have to be a minister, you're called a center leader.
Center leader.
And you can lead and become the minister. Well, and I ended up doing that, but my first part, I ended up getting credentials and getting I have several different things from different organizations. I am Reverend Phyllis Ferris.
Okay,
but it started that way. I had no intention, none of this, all this was, we had ministers that we couldn't keep any longer. In fact, I won't go into details, just that it had to, they could not be there anymore.
Are you still part of this church now?
No, for years and years I have been, until about 15 years ago.
15?
Yeah. I retired.
As the
pastor.
Okay.
I was a pastor for 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And after what happened, I had colon cancer and then a stroke, and I wasn't able to continue anymore, and so I retired.
I see.
And I have had this funny life, things I never intended. That's why I always tell people, you never know what God has in mind for you. Just hang in there.
True. Now,
my whole message is, trust God with all your heart and hang in there.
Right.
That's my whole message, because you never know where He can guide you. If you're wanting just to serve and to be there to help others. And that's I don't care what my title is. I'm a helper. I came to be a helper, server of the Lord, that's all.
And I heard you say when you were living in Bridgeton, so tell us about your time of living in Bridgeton.
Well, I lived in Bridgeton Dale and I were there for 7 years.
Where exactly in Bridgeton?
We lived in Brittany Acres.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Off Natural Bridge?
Yeah, yeah. And then I moved after Dale died. Actually, what happens, my kid set fire to the place accidentally.
Oh my gosh.
What he did, he found a cigarette lighter, and he's playing with it in his room. I'm resting. It's on a Saturday, as I recall, and I'm in resting. He's taking a rest. I think he set fire to his drapes in his room, and then it went to the, and then he locked the door, and I smelled the fire, and I got up, and that door was locked. So I ran to the phone to call my kitchen where the phone was, and the kid was there on the counter. he had caused the fire, and he didn't close the door. Little tiny boy, he was only about 5 or 6 years old, you know. And, but it caused damage, and then I needed to move.
Yeah.
So I just moved around the corner, went to Chateau de Monde, and I lived there for 31 years.
Now, and so did the kids go to school there?
My
in
kids were gone by then. I
Oh.
just had Dan. Dan was there. Dan went to school. Yeah. My other kids are all grown
I
up.
see.
Yeah.
And Dan, was he from your marriage with Dale?
Yeah.
I see.
He's Daniel Dale Ferris.
Daniel
Yeah.
Dale, okay, all right.
Daniel is his grandfather.
I see,
Yeah.
I see. So Phyllis, how did you come about your present little part-time thing of being a leader of the senior exercise at Bridgeton?
Well, a funny thing that would happen, I just was attending the class. I used to go to St. Anne exercise, and I went there regularly. And then somebody told me about the Bridgeton class. So I went out, and I liked it a lot. I liked a lot of things out there. I liked the people I met and the different activities that were
And
going
this
on.
was at the old, the Bridgeton Community Center.
Oh, a lot of years ago.
Okay,
Yeah, it's been a long time ago.
right.
And then I started, and Laverne was the instructor, and I liked her a lot. And still, I just talked to her today again, yeah. Laverne and I are friends. But what had happened, I was just a participant for years. But what had happened, they had made an offer of some training, exercise thing for strength building. And I took the class, several of them. There were like 8 of us that took the training. And I thought, it really surprised me. They tested us before the class. And it was a 12-week program that we took. And then they came in from the university and taught it.
Was it like through Missouri Extension?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what it was, yes. And after we finished, on our week 12, they tested us all. We'd all made a lot of advance with it. And then, the question was raised about, well, what do we do now with it? And they said, well, you're on your own. Now.
They're throwing you
And
out.
they recommended that one of us do it, and they said, Phyllis, we suspect, we agreed that we thought you could be excellent in doing this. I said, well, I don't know. But I said, well, I'll try it. And then it began.
And so tell me,
I didn't set out to do it, you know.
now I have never taken your class,
Uh-huh.
but I know that the Bridgeton seniors seem to really like their exercise classes. And they are
Well,
on Mondays and Wednesdays, you said?
It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Okay.
And it's free.
It's free.
Absolutely
How
free.
does that happen?
Well, I had to pay money when I went to St. Anne, because I wasn't a resident, and I paid so much every time I went to the exercise classes. But this, when you came out to Bridgeton, it was totally free. And I thought, well, isn't that wonderful?
Yes, very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Do you have to be a senior to participate?
Yeah, I think so. It's
Okay.
like a program that we're in, yeah. It's a great one.
So did you design your own exercise session?
No, I used the format that they gave us.
Okay.
They gave us, with the training that they
Right.
did, and I bought a video of it so that I would be sure that I was following it and doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was a temporary thing, just like being the minister. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I took it as a thing till we got a real minister in.
But this lady Laverne, she was already doing it?
Oh, yeah, she's one who ended up 25, 26 years of being the instructor there, and she's wonderful.
So you and Laverne are just do it as a
We're
volunteer.
volunteers. Yeah, we're just
And that
volunteers.
way they, I guess, can do a no charge for the people.
No, it's just there. It's a service.
How many
Let
people
me tell you, with her,
Uh-huh.
it's, how I have, it's like a calling when I was the minister.
Mhm.
Laverne was a calling. I have no doubt about it. She does it with her whole heart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, exercise is so important for people. You gotta keep moving.
When I look at the benefits of it, when I, and of course too, Well, Laverne helped me recently because one of the men in my class said to me, Cyril Wayer said, I like your program, but I wish it was longer because I only did the routine that I was given.
And how long was that? Half
That was
hour?
only about, 35, 40 minutes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it was 2 sets. You did set 1, and you had a time in between, and then you did set 2. Well, what I added to it was jokes. Because
Jokes.
laughter is the best medicine, you know what I'm
Yes,
saying?
true.
So I added joke because you had to do something in between the 2 sets. You waited 2 to 3 minutes, and I thought,
Oh.
why don't I just tell them jokes? And so I got joke
Uh-huh.
books. And the title of the book is Laughter is the Best Medicine.
Sure.
Then in addition to it, Nina gave me a book, and it's more prayerful little things in it. So after set 1, we do one kind, and then after set 2, we do another. They go with kind of a spiritual little bit to it. And then when after Syl said that to me about it, I wish that you was longer. And I said, Syl, so do I. I wish it. And I talked to Laverne, and I said, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to kind of incorporate your warm-up and your cool-down. I think it could fit right in with mine. She said, well, go do it. And like one time, I was always, because sometimes I don't always remember exactly. I try to remember and keep this thing from my routine because I've done it for a lot of years. But once in a while, I'd forget a part. Well, Jerry O'Brien would say, hey, wait a minute. So I said to her, I'm a little dumbfounded when those things. She said, Phil, just make it up. You know the basic program, just go for it. And I said,
Right.
oh, so she has been absolutely wonderful for me.
And how long have you done that then? How long have you been leading?
You know, I don't know. I know probably 7 or 8 years.
Wow, uh-huh.
Yeah, somewhere in there, I think about that. I never knew it was going to be ongoing. You know, I just thought it was a little thing I was doing.
Right.
And I love it.
But you said you had a setback, a health setback.
I'm sorry.
You said you had a health setback about 7 or 8 years ago?
Well, I've had hip replacement, and I was to think I was walking with I was having to, with the cane all the time because it was bothering me so much.
Mm-hmm.
But after the hip, it was my left hip, and I went from severe to very severe, and I was really having trouble with it. And when as soon as but I scrupulously was careful about doing everything that they told me, after the thing, and exercised exactly when they told me to and things. And I went from being in a lot of pain. From the day of my surgery, I've never been in pain again.
Wow, wonderful.
Never. They handled it beautifully in the hospital, and when I was home recuperating, and then I've never, some people have had problems with nerve damage and blood clots. And
Right.
Mine's just absolutely wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So do you attend, you lead the senior exercise on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Do you attend another senior
yeah.
exercise?
Oh yeah, I go Monday and Fridays.
Do you?
Yeah, not always because I have family things that come up. Then but I try to at least do one other one a week. Oh, and I enjoy it. I like it. I really believe, because I never dreamed that you could be, I'm nearly 88 years old next month, to be this age and feel this good.
Wonderful.
I think I attribute so much of it to the exercise things that I do.
Yes, that's
I really
great.
do. And remember that I was using a walker sometimes and a cane and things before, and I just live simply, and but I'm so blessed because I just feel, I never knew, see, people in my life, my family didn't live to be this old, and just didn't, people, they're mostly 60 and 70 and they were gone, And here I've had colon cancer, and a serious stroke, and my body keeps healing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, back when I was, the years when I was 69 and 70, I ran into some really serious health things. That's the colon cancer and then the stroke. And then they healed up, and I've been able to, and then until I had the hip replacement. And I've had cataract surgery, just recently. but I'm doing fine with it.
That's
Yeah, I'm just-
wonderful.
Yeah, my body is healthy. and it
That's
keeps
great.
and I love that I can still help.
Do you take part in any of these senior activities in Bridgeton? I know they go on different day trips. Have you ever gone on any
I
of them?
have.
Oh, really?
But I'm trying to remember what it was. But one of the things too, but through the center we have a wonderful annual party that we have from all our groups that we go on, and it's absolutely wonderful.
I'm not
No.
familiar with it. What
Aren't
is
you?
it?
Well, it's for the exercise group. We all have an annual thing. Everybody brings stuff.
Oh,
You know,
uh-huh.
And then we bring little gifts, things too, and then it's given off to the people who win little prizes, playing
Uh-huh.
card games and
Right,
stuff, like
uh-huh.
that. But it's just a different way of getting to know each other. It's a barbecue. We'll have barbecued hot dogs and sometimes ribs and things, and everybody brings a little something to it, salads and desserts and everything. And it's a wonderful get together. See, and we relate to each other a little differently. Because sometimes you're in the class and can you go and then you leave and you go home. Well, at this you spend several hours and you sit. Where one time one of the ladies, Pat Conner, when I didn't know her very well, I sat next to her at the picnic. We got to be good friends, So those are the kinds of things that add for us, Now, Bridgeton, I love that they have things that they give to people, that it's there. And there's buses that they have, to help people. Some people come on the buses.
That's true. I don't know if everybody realizes this service we have.
Right.
And do you have to pay for the buses?
I don't know about it. I wouldn't think so, some of the people who come. I doubt that. I suspect it's given to them. Yeah.
I think that they can go within a given radius or something like that. Yes.
I would, knowing how Bridgeton does things, truthfully.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and thank you for just allowing us to, get to know you and sharing your life with us.
I've had a funny life.
Well, I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.